Today is Saturday, the 29th of April. You know, it's the people primates, the more the Anthropocene comes in, the more they're uncertain about things, but they don't want to talk about it as if they're uncertain. And the more they're insecure and the more they have low self-esteem and self-confidence, and the more their image of themselves is harder to sell, even to themselves, than distrust of those that are different than the norm, strangers or but even strangers that are exactly like themselves. But me, I'm not at all like them, and I'm a pretty much stranger everywhere. So I'm noticing, this is such a common pattern. Doesn't matter if I have a criminal record check. Doesn't matter I leave a place after a few months, and my levels of integrity and honesty and keeping to my word is impeccable. It's they will continue to distrust because I'm so different than them. And it's sad. It's sad. I mean, it's also insulting, some of the things they say people to justify these failures in their thinking that they're also training their kids to have and their pets to have. It's it's not easy suffering from species alienation, and yet I'm doing pretty good. But I can't imagine somebody with the connection to reality that I have with the Homo sapien operating system, who could cope. But of course, it wasn't always easy, and it took time to develop this resiliency of the mind and this certainty that can't be shaken anymore because, well, evidence is evidence. I'm not going to overlook evidence that becomes more and more apparent every day. You might think self-confirming bias, but I mean, you're not going to verify whether it is or not. I dare you to. But some people make the mistake of getting into conversations with me that are philosophical. They're about current affairs or the human condition, and they can't handle it. And I'm like, I don't recommend you. And they still can't stop it. And it's because they try to justify their existence, their choices, their life near the end of their life, and how it had an impact on their kids and creating the world they're leaving behind for their kids, and how I have a response to everything they might want to bring up, and yet they still keep trying. They still keep trying to live in this illusion, and then I become the villain again, because I can explain things in ways that is apparent to them and make the connections between things. And then there's this cognitive dissonance that's happening in their brain is somehow not a phenomenon they understand. They just maybe lose the ability to be having a little bit of reason, not critical thinking. Critical thinking is not possible even among our scientists. I mean, there's so many sciences that the big industry kind of hijack of how and when it'll become common knowledge for the masses to know about. And but I mean, you can always retrace this, right? You can always retrace when oil companies knew about this, when cigarette companies knew about this, and often it's at the onset of their products, really at the beginning. And then when there's alternatives or solutions or things, like for example, it's very possible the price of fuel will go down immensely when electric cars are more common. And and of course, you're going to have issues with electrical grids and with counter terraforming the planet for electricity. It's all the biggest threat to the planet is the numbers of our species and the lifestyles that we live. It's always that. I mean, you could ask anybody going back really thousands of years, hundreds, if not thousands of years, to know that's what it is, right? It's not just one industry. It's really a species flaw. And these are not things people can handle when I talk about it because they know their kids will grow up where the problem is everywhere and it's growing, and they can't handle that. They need to justify having trained their kids that life is a monopoly game when it isn't. And when that crashes, because it's supposed to crash, because that's the way it's designed, really. I mean, and again, you have specialists that could have told you this generations and generations ago, is you'll keep doing this and you'll keep justifying because it's the path of least resistance, because it's easy to ignore the obvious, and yet to most people I am the suspicious stranger who has put everything together. I'm the elusive Homo sapien walking among you. That's why I tell Christians, man, I hope Jesus doesn't come back. You're gonna regret so much the way you treat him eventually if you find out that was Jesus, and you're not going to be able to deal with that, whether your God forgives you or not. Your guilt is like, how could we have been so anti-Christian in our behaviors as an entire group, more anti-Christians than people that have never heard of Christianity in certain, let's say, Aboriginal communities that have stayed away from modernity. And of course, modernity is not a bad thing. It's just a bad thing the way we talk about it, the way we don't understand it, what we do with it, what we don't do with it in these conversations, in these understandings. It's not like progress is bad. It's just that what you consider progress is actually devolution. And these are the conversations that really upset you when you have them with me, even though I say, do you want me to restart Philosopher's Cafe and you'll come? Otherwise, I don't think you can handle this. And, remember what happened last time. And still you go there. You still try to justify your lives. And now, what industry can I work in where I won't be stuck in these conversations? It can't be with kids. It can't be with animals. It can't be in the social sciences. It can't be with counselors or mental health workers. It can't be in the legal system, because every conversation is too hard for the 99.98% of you that are the people primates that are just deer in headlights during the Anthropocene that you keep accelerating. And you can't bulge. You can't even do simple things. Like I tell you guys, well, just how about you do this with your backyard instead of this? And people just can't. They can't do a tiny thing. They can't, for example, recycle properly. They can't, stop a drug habit or a mental illness thing that they talk about as if they've solved it when they haven't, and they've passed it on to their kids. And just because they talk about it a little bit, they're not walking the talk of curing it. They're just talking about it more, and therefore they are so great. And people that don't trust me are less trustworthy, and they don't realize how. They don't realize that they've become like this because they see themselves as superior, because the norm is what makes them superior. The more they fit into the norm, the more they're superior to the guy that's different, to the stranger, to the truly honest person with integrity who doesn't want to be part of the problem. So as much as in these 2 months, I'll say, well, this is how you were dishonest with me, and tell me how I've been dishonest in these 2 months. And again, they can't really give an answer other than what it feels like interacting with me. Well, that's not reality, people. Well, it is reality. It's the reality of the theory, the grand unification theory I've been talking about all this time that you keep wanting to avoid.